Good evening. All right, so we are talking about digestive problems tonight, and going with your gut is the theme. And so this is really a problem that is affecting so many people. And if you struggle with gut issues, you know what I'm talking about. We're going to be covering what I see in the practice and what I see are the best results. And I'm going to include some of the leading edge things that we're doing. And sometimes there's a lag time between the conventional way of addressing things and what the leading edge is showing. So I'm going to bring you right up to speed with what we find. So this is not going to be the same old that you hear as you investigate this. And I want to just share just very quickly, the person that comes to mind when I think of digestive problems is this one classic person in the practice. And she was a teacher and she just had terrible gas. And it was so embarrassing for her. And not only that, she was an athlete as well. And so we just got to work and we applied some of the very strategies that you're going to hear about tonight. And lo and behold, she was actually able to heal her gut so that she no longer had this embarrassing problem. And she noticed that her athletic performance actually improved as well as part of the results of getting a healthier body. So I'm going to show you tonight some of the things that she also got great results with. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are struggling with this, and it is a broad range, and it affects actually all ages and all, classes and all professions. Like it's kind of a playing field leveler, as they say, because it affects lots of folks, men and women, and all ages. And so we're going to cover tonight what I see in the practice, which is a kind of going from one end of the digestive system to the other. And so we're going to cover all of those things. And I want to just give you that range and give you a perspective. I want you to understand what your body is telling you when it gives you symptoms or signals, so that you can then respond appropriately to those signals and get the results that you want. And so we're going to look at the full range of the digestive system, from the very beginning where people are getting reflux and GERD and heartburn, that kind of thing, to people that are struggling with IBS and diverticulitis and that kind of thing, all the way to constipation, where it's just sluggish and just not getting out the other end, and everything in between. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about celiac as well. And let's now and there's one other person that has inspired me as far as digestive problems go. And it's a colleague of mine he's a chiropractor, but before he was a chiropractor, he actually was Mr. America. And you would never know that somebody that looks that fit, that actually he was struggling with digestive issues. And he was struggling so much that, I'm just trying to advance my slides here. There we go. He was struggling so much that they actually told him that there was nothing else they could do. They were going to have to remove part of his colon. And he was just about to get married. And they said, yeah, well, once we remove your colon, you're probably not going to get to have any kids. And so his whole life was like, his dream life was just disappearing in front of him. And so one of his friends, even though he said, I've tried everything, I've been to the best doctors, and this is the only thing left for me to do, one of his friends said, well, you haven't tried everything because you haven't tried chiropractic yet. And so he ends up going to a chiropractor, and it was not overnight. It took some time, but he literally was able to heal his gut, to avoid that surgery and to heal his gut. And he was so inspired by his experience that he just went and became a chiropractor, and has been inspiring so many other people all along the way. So, just because someone looks really fit, it doesn't mean that they have a healthy gut, or they could have other health issues as well. And so tonight we are going to cover all of this. And I want to start by just kind of a 10,000 foot overview and put everything in perspective. So when this is one in a series that we do called the Body Signals Program, that's condition specific solutions, and we cover a different topic each month. And so when you're having gut issues, it is your body's way of asking you for help. And the question is, are you listening? Because in our culture, what we're trained to do is just try to mask the symptoms or live around them. Oh yeah, I get heartburn when I eat the spicy foods and the tomatoes, so I just don't eat those anymore and I'm good. Okay, so that's called living around it. And so sure, you want to be disciplined about things, and definitely you can make some changes along the way to just lower the stress on your system. But ultimately, we want to see a healthy system that's responding in a healthy and appropriate way. And so a body signal is kind of the tip of the iceberg. When you're getting a symptom, that's the tip of the iceberg, but it's often telling us that there's something bigger going on underneath. And so I know somebody who they had hemorrhoids. That's the very end of the digestive system. And they just kept living around it until it got to the point where they were almost bleeding to death. It was such a constant, steady, small amount that all their blood lab values were going down. They could have died from hemorrhoids because they were living around it instead of getting healthier. So we want to understand that when we have a body signal, it could be the tip of the iceberg of something bigger going on underneath it. And so I speak body all day long. And so I want to teach you, when your body's giving you certain signals, how do you listen to those signals so that you can go in the direction that's going to get you a healthier response, where you can actually heal your gut rather than just live around it and trying to mask those symptoms. So symptoms have a purpose and they fall on a continuum. When we look at this continuum here, at one end, we have premature death. At the other end, we have high-level wellness. And so this is not two separate things. This is a continuum. And so in the middle, on the left-hand side, premature death, this is all the sick side where you have symptoms. The other right-hand side is the healthy side. And this part right in the middle, this is the not sick zone. But the not sick zone is also the not healthy zone. And so everybody is living somewhere on this continuum. Everybody is. And so if you have any symptoms at all, you're already down in this level of function. And if you don't do anything about it, you just try to live around it and mask it, chances are your function is going to continue until you're in a disability state where you can't fix those symptoms anymore. You don't have any more choice. You have to live around it now. And you're getting closer and closer to earlier death. And so the signs are something that will start to show up before the symptoms. This is important. The signs are something that is measurable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you feel. A symptom is something that you feel, but a sign is something you can measure before you're feeling the symptoms. So you can see in this not sick zone, you're not healthy, but you're not really having any symptoms yet. And yet, as you move in this direction, there are going to be signs. And those signs, if they're not addressed, are going to start to turn into symptoms and so on. So you get how this works. So everybody is somewhere on this continuum, and everybody is moving in one direction or the other. Nobody is standing still. And everybody's going to move at a certain velocity. And there's a certain momentum to that as well. And so if you have been living an unhealthy lifestyle over time, that is cumulative, and that's going to be pushing you in this direction. And so the direction you're heading is going to be equal to the sum of the lifestyle choices that you're making. And so sometimes when people come to see me, my first job is just to slow down the direction that they're heading. They still have momentum to it. We just got to slow that down, put the brakes on it, and then turn the corner and then get folks moving in the direction towards that level of high-level, robust health that they want. But they just didn't know how to get there. So the symptoms are there for a purpose, to tell us what direction you're heading, and then just understanding how to speak body so that we can move in the right direction. But often people are taught that symptoms are the only way they're really evaluating their health. So until they get a symptom, they just think everything is hunky-dory. So a lot of people are living in the not sick zone, but they're calling it healthy. This is healthy, very different from not sick. And because they're just living here, they're very close to suddenly popping down into symptoms as things get worse. So people are taught that symptoms are the best indicator for health. Really now, let's look at this. If we look at when you feel symptoms, sensory nerves are what feel things. They feel pain and so on, like that. Sensory nerves also control your posture and also feel things like hot and cold. They feel pressure and that sort of thing. So feeling pain is only a subset of the sensory nerves. And then the sensory nerves are just a subset of the entire nervous system. So the three parts of the nervous system also include the motor nerves, which are running the muscles. And that includes some of the muscles of around the organs. The autonomic nerves are controlling the function of the organs, blood vessels, and glands. So the autonomic nerves will cover the smooth muscle that is part of organ function and digestive system function. And the motor nerves will cover the voluntary muscles that are involved with digestive system function. And so you could, if you had pain, if you're only relying on pain, that's only 10% of the nervous system. You literally could have 90% of your nervous system not functioning properly. And if you didn't have the sensory nerves, you wouldn't even know it. So if you didn't have pain, you'd think everything was fine, but you could have quite a bit of dysfunction in the motor and the autonomic nerves. So we can't just rely on pain as the only way to evaluate whether we're healthy or not. We have to be measuring what's happening in these other parts of the nervous system, because the nervous system is what controls everything. Now, since we're taught to manage our health by our symptoms, that can be trouble, because when you have symptoms, the first thing you may be thinking is, what do I need to just get rid of this symptom? I've got this belly cramping and pain. Like, what do I need to just stop this pain? And there are some dangerous beliefs that people have that are going to get them into trouble. And here's one of them: the dangerous belief that drugs work. It doesn't mean that they don't work. It's just, if you believe that the drugs are going to work and are going to solve your problem, then you very well may go and take a drug that is masking the symptom, but it's not actually solving the problem because it's not healing your gut. And so then after a while, the problem starts to get worse. The drugs don't work anymore. Now you're on stronger drugs, more dangerous drugs. Then there's the side effects. And now you've got new problems. Now you've got more drugs for the side effects. And you see exactly where this goes. And in fact, we just want the symptoms to go away. But the media, the public relations, the commercials on TV are just training us on what to do. And in fact, they try to tell us, if you just take this drug, you're going to have the best life possible. Here's what I mean. Does this guy look familiar? All right. So this is Larry the Cable Guy, and he's standing in front of the colossal corn dogs. And so we're at the fair, aren't we? And here is this young couple, and they basically are just being told that they are just going to be able to enjoy all that life has to offer if they can just prevent the heartburn that's going to come with their diet that they're choosing right now, right? So that's what this commercial is trying to get people to take Prilosec as a prevention. Just take it so that you can just eat whatever the hell you want, right? And just take the Prilosec and just carry on, right? Because the Prilosec is going to prevent the heartburn for you. Well, would everybody just agree that we need to live differently than this? And by the way, what are the side effects? Because if you look at the small print here, this commercial is trying to get people to take it proactively or preventatively. Just take one a day and you'll be fine. And yet the fine print says only take it for 2 weeks, and don't take it for more than 2 weeks, and don't take it more than every 4 months. Like this is, and it's not for me, like they're giving you all these warning signs, but their messaging is, just take one a day. It's almost like it's a supplement or something like that. All right, well, let's look at what are the side effects of, if you were going to go with this, what are the side effects of taking Prilosec? Headache, abdominal pain. Wait a minute. Isn't that what we're trying to get rid of? Irregular heartbeat, persistent muscle spasms, seizures, diarrhea. Wait, diarrhea? Wait, isn't that what I'm trying to get healthier? abdominal or stomach pain or cramping, wait a minute, fever, blood or mucus in the stool, rash, itchiness, swelling, especially of the face, tongue, and throat. That sounds like an anaphylactic reaction. Severe dizziness, trouble breathing. Hang on. I think we need a better way. Don't sign me up for that, right? All right, so let's just lay some ground rules here. Your problem will just go away if you ignore them. That's another dangerous belief, isn't it? Right? So I oftentimes have people coming to me, and once they start to get the results, they're like, why didn't I come sooner? Because I thought it was just going to go away. And I don't know about you, but what happens to problems when you just ignore them? Do they get worse, harder to fix, more expensive to fix, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's the 5 most dangerous words in healthcare are maybe it will go away. And so first, if we're going to be taking action, we have to understand what the problem is. And so that's what I want to now look at. So let's just take a hard look at the cause of most stomach problems that people struggle with today. And let's first just start with some basic premises of how we're going to look at this. So the first premise is that healthy is normal. Healthy is normal. Unhealthy is abnormal. Digestive issues are abnormal, right? It is not healthy. Your body is smart. It was designed to be healthy. So it was designed to have an awesome functioning digestive system. Your nervous system is the master system that is controlling every other system, including the digestive system. So let's just take a look. When you're chewing your food, that's the beginning of the digestive system. What controls the muscles that chew the food? Your nervous system. When you then swallow that food and it's going down into your stomach, when it hits your stomach, what controls your stomach? The nervous system. And then you have this sphincter at the top of your stomach that's supposed to stop the fluids, the acidic fluids from the stomach to get up into the esophagus. What is it that controls the integrity and the tone of that sphincter? The nervous system. All right, and then the food leaves the stomach, and you've got, of course, the digestive enzymes that have been added in from the liver, from the pancreas. What controls the liver and the pancreas? The nervous system. All right, and then it goes into the duodenum and the small intestines, the jejunum, the ileum, right? What controls the small intestine? The nervous system. And then it goes by the appendix. What controls the appendix? The nervous system. And it goes into the large intestine. What controls the large intestine? The nervous system, right? Do you see where we're going with this, right? So the nervous system is the master system that's controlling everything else. And it's the only system in the body that is fully encased in bone. So we literally have a suit of armor protecting it. The spine is our suit of armor that protects our nervous system. And then we have to recognize that the nervous system is kind of like a circuit breaker that is protecting the brain, and it's that link between the rest of the body. And so if a circuit blows, right, it's going to interfere with the flow of messages between the brain and the body. And so when does a circuit blow? When there's some overload, right? And so modern life is unnaturally stressful. And so we are encountering overload all the time. And so what is all this stress doing to us? Well, first of all, we have to recognize it's coming at us in 3 dimensions. It's not just our thought life that is stressful and, feeling like we've got deadlines and chaos and disorganization, not to mention big stresses that happen like loss of a loved one or loss of a job or big things like that. Not to mention the world stresses that are out there, right? Yeah. Then we also have 2 other categories of stresses that are also we're being exposed to. Toxins, such as, big toxins like environmental pollution. And maybe every once in a while we get exposed to something really bad like lead or mercury or something like that. However, most of the time, the toxins are coming in the form of chemical stresses from the foods that we're eating, from the personal care products that we're using, just things that are at low levels that are just getting in all the time. And the third category is traumas. Maybe we have a car accident or a sports injury, or we slip and fall on the ice. And so that's a one-off event, but most of the time we actually have low-level physical stress in the form of bad posture and sedentary lifestyle. And so that stress is coming at us in 3 dimensions. And when we encounter any kind of stress at all, our body's designed to deal with stress. And so stress is an adaptive physiology. So when we're exposed to a stress, our body's going to respond to it. And the way we respond is actually as if 40,000 years ago, we encountered something that was truly stressful for us, which was maybe a tiger or a lion or something like that. So when that kind of stress shows up, our body needs to readily and appropriately adapt to it in the moment, and it gives us our best chance to save our life in that situation. And so our body instantly is going to, as soon as the nervous system perceives the stress, it instantly is sending messaging out to the rest of the body that's affecting our hormone levels, that's affecting our organ function, our blood vessels, and everything. And so our blood pressure is going to go up because we get blood out to the muscles. Our heart rate will go up, again, to get blood out to the muscles. Our muscle tone will tighten up to get ready to run or to fight or to just be still and be paralyzed in stillness. Our cholesterol levels will actually also go up because we need cholesterol to make cortisol, the stress hormone. We also need cholesterol for wound repair. So with the first line of defense when a wound occurs is get the cholesterol there to patch it up. Our clotting factors will actually go up because we're anticipating if that tiger scratches us, we're going to want to clot that blood as quickly as possible to heal up any wounds. Fear and anxiety, of course, are going to escalate, which gets us into tunnel vision, focus, hypersensitivity to hearing. Everything is on alert. Our insulin sensitivity is going to be downregulated, meaning that insulin is there to take sugar out of the blood. We actually want sugar to stay in the blood because that's how it's going to get to the muscles for fuel, so we can be fighting or fleeing as much as possible. So that means our blood sugar is going to go up. Now, our immune response is actually going to be downregulated because the immune system is an expensive system to run. And so our body is saying we need all resources ready to fight this tiger. We're going to put the immune system on hold so we can use those resources for right now, because in a few minutes, we'll be done fighting the tiger, and then we can upregulate the immune system to help us heal with any wounds that we have. But for the moment, immune system is going to be downregulated. Sex drive is going to be downregulated. Not a good time to be making babies when there's a tiger around. Our serotonin levels are also going to decrease. Not a good time to go to sleep when you're fighting a tiger. And our sleep cycles will be interrupted as well. We have to be on the alert for that tiger. What also happens is digestion is going to slow and stop. Actually, the very first thing that happens is digestion speeds up to empty the colon, right? You know that phrase, oh my God, I was so scared I ate my pants, right? Yeah. So that we're going to speed things up and empty the colon, and then we're just going to downregulate that whole digestive system, because right now we're about to be lunch. This is not a time to be eating lunch, right? So you can just see how this is a perfect design for a perfect response when we have to adapt to an acute stressor. But what if this is just ongoing? Now we're going to be in trouble. It's deadly if it's experienced as a chronic stressor. And in this case, it can be deadly because it's going to affect your digestion. So when we look at the different parts of the nervous system, there's 2 parts. Well, let's just say this. There are 3 parts to the nervous system: the sensory, the motor. Motor runs the muscles and moves the body. Sensory feels things and input up to the brain. Autonomic is what's in charge of running all the organs. So the digestive system is controlled by, for the most part, the autonomic nervous system. And we have 2 parts to the autonomic nervous system. We have the parasympathetic, which is all about rest and repair, and digestion and reproduction. The sympathetic is for that fight or flight. And so stress hormones will create an adaptive physiology that is going to dampen down the parasympathetic when it's time to fight a tiger, so that we can ramp up the sympathetic for the fight or flight response. So it's kind of the idea of putting your foot on the gas and the brakes. But you do need to know that in order for digestion to work right, you need to be in a relaxed state. And so if a tiger's jumping out of the woods at you, you're going to need to be on alert for that. But you don't want to be walking around all day, every day in fight or flight, and because that's going to have an adverse reaction on how your viscera work, how your organs work. All right, so that's just again a review. This is Neurology 102, but again now just a review of Neurology 101. Basically, as I just said, this spine is like a circuit breaker. And so the brain sends the messages down through the spinal cord, out through the nerves to go to every organ in the body and every tissue cell in the body. Every tissue cell, everywhere you can think of where you are, there's 3 to 9 nerve fibers going to it. That's how extensive it is. And so we can see in this, the map of the nervous system, we can see it. And the blue, if you can see it this tiny, the blue nerves are the parasympathetic nerves that are controlling the organs. So the vagus nerve comes right out of the top of the spine, and it comes down, and look what it's in charge of. The heart, the lungs, the stomach, the liver, the intestines, all the way down to the large intestines, the adrenals as well. And then we see down the bottom, there's a blue one. That's another parasympathetic, and that takes care of the other part of the lower digestion, bladder, and so on, reproductive organs. The yellow is the sympathetic. And so the fight or flight control of these organs comes out of the middle of the spine, these nerves. And then we also have nerves that go up into the head that are controlling everything to do with the head functions, the sensory, the not sensory, but everything on the head, and controlling the eyes, controlling the nose, controlling the mouth, and so on, the ears. Okay, so that is Neurology 101. And then the spine is the suit of armor that is protecting the spinal cord. So I want to show you, it's a little bit of a close-up here. So we can see that the bones of the spine are stacked up one on top of each other. The discs are in between the bones to create a spacer, so that there's that hole is the right size for that nerve to have room to breathe, to carry the messages back and forth to the body. And so if we have any misalignment of the vertebrae that puts pressure on the nerve, that can start to interfere with the flow of messages between the brain and the body. And because we know what the map of the nervous system is, depending on where the subluxation is, we know what part of the body may be affected. Now you can see the digestive system is being controlled from the top of the spine, but also the nerves that come out of this area of the back come out and they go to the stomach. The nerves that come out of here are going to the small intestines, the liver, the pancreas. Out from this area, they're going to the large intestine, and so on. So all of the nervous system is controlling all the different parts of the digestive system. So the big idea here is that as long as the messages get from the brain to the body and back again without interference, you get to be healthy. So we just need to have the flow of messages getting out and back without interference. If anything interferes, then it's going to cause a breaking down of function in the body. So our body was designed to be healthy as long as we have this clear nerve supply. If we interrupt that nerve supply, we're going to see breaking down of function in the body. And there's only one thing that causes that, is some sort of interference. And there's only two things that can interfere: toxicity and a deficiency. And as soon as we can just reconcile what that toxicity or deficiency or both are, then we can correct the interference and we can get you back on the track to health. So that's the big idea, to remove the interference so that the body can be back in that state of optimal health. The spine is very sophisticated, really, in the way it's designed. And so we have the shock absorber of the curves in the spine. We have the spacers that are the discs between the bones. The design of it is really incredible and amazing. But when we have misalignments of the spine, subluxations or short circuits, just like a circuit blowing, that's when we're going to start to get into trouble. So let's look more closely at that. A subluxation is when there's, and I'm just going to move this to the side here. A subluxation is when there is a misalignment of the vertebrae, and that then causes soft tissue damage, which creates inflammation, which then causes nerve irritation. When this nerve is being irritated, your smart body is going to try and just quiet it down by strapping that joint down to stop any more movement, because every time you move, it's going to be irritating that nerve more because it's all inflamed. So your smart body spasms the muscles, but when that happens, the disc is not going to be having any movement anymore. Now, a disc does not have a lot of blood supply to it. Instead, it works more like a sponge. So if you wanted to get something out of the sponge, you squeeze it, and when you let go, it absorbs things back in. That's the way the disc works. So the way the disc gets nutrients in and gets toxins out is through movement. When there's movement, it squishes it down and releases it, and that's how the disc stays healthy. When the muscles strap down that joint over time, the disc is no longer getting pumped. And so it has a loss of imbibition. Imbibition is that flow of fluids in and out based on movement. So we lose the imbibition. The joint is fixated, meaning the joint is no longer moving. And when a joint moves, the brain senses it because of something called mechanoreceptors in every joint. A mechanoreceptor is what sends a signal to the brain anytime movement of that joint occurs. And what that does is it helps the brain to track exactly where the body is in space. Have you ever had the experience of just lying still? You wake up in the morning and you're just lying still, and all of a sudden you think, where are my arms? Because you haven't moved them. And then as soon as you move, even just a little finger, you're like, oh, there it is, right? Okay. And that's because the mechanoreceptors weren't firing. And so the brain was like, where is everybody? Oh, and movement starts to happen. Now the brain knows where everybody is. So when you strap a joint down, the brain no longer is getting firing of those mechanoreceptors. The brain starts to get worried, like, what is going on down there? And so as a result, it will actually elevate stress hormones in the body when there is a joint fixation. And so it literally will go into a global stress response in the body when there are subluxations. And of course, that stress response is high blood pressure and digestive system tanks and immune system tanks, like all those things that actually can happen and be pushed to continue as long as subluxations are there. So we can have subluxations causing digestive problems simply from having higher cortisol levels, higher stress hormones in the body. And then we can also have the subluxations interfering the flow of messages going back and forth specifically to certain organ systems. Now, how is it that we measure the effects of stress, and specifically on the stresses that are affecting digestion? There's two ways that we do this. One is we literally can measure how well you're adapting to the current stresses that you're under. And we use the heart rate variability, HRV. So this is a heart rate variability scale, or a scan. And the green bullseye is optimum. That's where we want to see people land. And if people are landing in the bullseye, it tells us that whatever stresses they're being exposed to, they are managing them. They're meeting those stresses, and so the stresses are not overloading them. The white dot is where the person actually is in the measurement. So this person is not hitting the green bullseye. They are below that. That means that the stresses they are currently having are overloading them. Now, that white dot also is a little bit off to the left. And if you look at the tiny words down here, this is sympathetic and parasympathetic. So when we are doing this test, somebody is sitting in a room, they're sitting there by themselves for 3 minutes, they're not sleeping, and there are no stresses in the room with them. It's just a quiet, calm place. And so in this case, this person, their brain is saying, yeah, it doesn't matter how quiet it seems right here. I know that there's a stress somewhere lurking. It's probably right outside the door. So I've got to be ready. And so this person, they are still in this sympathetic dominance. And we saw that when the sympathetic nervous system is dominating, we're going to be shutting down digestion. And so if we're going to help this person, we've got to help them manage stress more effectively as well. And we've got to add robustness. We've got to get them to be more adaptable, more robust to the current stresses. Now, in our culture, what we're told is, oh, you're being stressed. Just avoid those stresses. just don't want so much. Oh, that job is too stressful for you. You should go find a less stressful job. Oh, that relationship is too stressful for you. You should find a less stressful relationship, right? We're often told to just live around these things instead of adding more robustness so we can adapt to these stresses and even greater ones. Then you get to live your life on your own terms instead of just living around things. Now, we also use another tool, which is the rolling thermography, and it is measuring the autonomic nervous system. And so this is the one where we roll it up and down your spine. And when we're doing that, it's picking up the nerves, it's actually picking up the temperature on either side of the spine. So you have nerves that come out from the spine and they go out to different parts of the body on each side. And so if the skin is exposed to the same temperature in the room, then the nerves that control the skin blood flow should be doing the same thing on either side. But if one side is hotter and the other side is colder, then that tells us there's an imbalance there. Something's going on. There may be more inflammation in one area, or there may be dysfunctionally cold on one side. And that's because of nerve interference. And so we can actually literally look at the map of the nervous system, because the nerves that come out, that are coming out from the spine, controlling the temperature of the skin right here, those nerves will continue to go out and go to certain organs in the body. And we know exactly what that map of that nervous system is. So if we already see dysfunction here, then we can presume that the messaging getting out to the organs is also going to be distorted. And so that means that it's going to be, over time, there's going to be breaking down in function of those organs. Now, whether or not you have the symptoms yet, that's another story. You could have dysfunction over time that finally ends up in symptoms. But when did it start? And so again, these are two fantastic tools that we have that allow us to actually measure the nervous system and the effects of stress on the nervous system. So when there is nerve interference, as we're seeing the evidence right here, this is a subluxation. But what is it that causes subluxations? It's any overload is what causes a subluxation. So just like the circuit breaker in your basement, those circuits don't blow just randomly. They only are going to blow when there's overload. And so again, that overload can be cumulative. So you could manage somebody beeping their horn angrily at you on any given day. But if you've just come out of a hellish time at work and you're on your way home to a dysfunctional relationship, stressful relationship, and now winter's coming, and then somebody blows their horn at you, like you could have road rage at that moment. And it's because things are cumulative. So that cumulative stress is going to be coming from life happening that we can't control, but a lot of it is coming from our own bad habits that we have. There could be things like poor posture, poor lifestyle choices, just not getting enough exercise, going to bed too late, right? When we start to put together bad habits and poor posture, oftentimes those are the things that are causing and promoting subluxations much more than a one-off event like a car accident that happens hopefully never in your life, but maybe once, maybe twice, but hopefully not more than that, right? So one-off events may occur, but it's the ongoing things that are the real trouble, that are really causing persistent subluxation patterns. So that's what causes subluxations, and it is cumulative. So the more subluxations that you have, the less adaptable you are, and the more easy it is to get more subluxations, because you're now just being overloaded by everything. Whereas when your system is robust and you are readily and appropriately adapting to your stresses, those are not going to be causing subluxations. Okay, does that make sense? That's important that you understand the cumulative effect. Just today, I had somebody in the office who's been under care with me for many years. She saw my daughter grow up in the practice. That's how many years she remembers when I was pregnant with my daughter, right? So that's how many years she's been in the practice. And she just came back from some rigorous travel. And she goes, boy, it was really planes, trains, and automobiles. It was a lot of travel stress that I had. And at the end of the adjustment, she's like, wow, I'm back. So in just one adjustment, she recovered from all that travel stress. And she says, you know, I know that it's cumulative, that I can just come back like that because of all the work that I've been doing all along, that my nervous system just knows what to do now when I get adjusted, if it has any overload. And I said, yeah, you're right. It is cumulative. And then I whispered to her, and you know what that is? That's healthy normal, that what you're experiencing, being able to just readily and appropriately adapt to that stress. You get an adjustment and you've recovered, right? So that's the idea that we are looking for when we talk about healthy normal. Okay, so now let's jump into what are the things that I see. I'm going to start at the bottom end of the digestive system. We're going to talk about constipation. Okay, not everybody likes to talk about constipation. In fact, I will tell you, there are a lot of people that are out there that have more people than you might know who are struggling with this, but they don't want to talk about it with anybody. And so, but it's a very important piece because an engine is only as good as its exhaust system, right? We need to be able to get things out of the body. And if we're not getting things out of the body, toxins removed, then everything just starts to get gummed up and it wreaks havoc with the entire system. So it's not just that constipation is uncomfortable, it's actually a serious issue. And, you know, people don't like to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it today. All right, so what is happening here? It's all about the muscles and it's about the tone in the muscles. So tone is what moves the food along the digestive tract. And the digestive tract is very sophisticated, with it being a whole series of these involuntary smooth muscles. And just like just like any muscle, we can end up with tonal issues. Nerves are what are controlling the movement of the food along the tract, from chewing, the mastication, the motility, the swallowing. That's all voluntary muscle. But once we swallow it, it goes down through, and we do use an involuntary reflex to swallow that bolus of food, and it moves right down the GI tract with very specialized tissues that are moving along. Everything is controlled by what? You know, nervous system. So the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems are all having an influence here on how that bolus of food is being moved right along the digestive system. The stomach is going to grind down and break down the foods. The pH and the acidity of the system and the digestive enzymes, those are being controlled by the nervous system. The liver and the pancreas and their digestive enzymes, nervous system. The health of the lining of the GI tract, the lining of the digestive system. What controls that? What controls mucus production and pH? The nervous system. Drawing nutrients out from the bowels and drawing water out of the bowels to reuse again in the body. What controls that? The nervous system. So there are those three parts of the nervous system. Two of them are in the digestive system. And it's so, the nervous system and the digestive system are so intrinsically connected. We even talk about the gut brain, right? We talk about the brain, but then we talk about the gut brain as well. So it's the nervous system that is being referred to there. And so as food moves along this process, we can end up with tonal issues. When we have chronic subluxations, it can cause chronic stress hormones, which slow down the GI tract. And then that also can interrupt the normal flow through the system. And then we can get chronic digestive problems for multiple reasons. So when we check the spine, we typically find that constipation is associated with this tonal issue. So more often than not, there's going to be emotional and psychological stresses, and that's going to stress the nervous system that then controls the digestive function. So when we're checking the nervous system to see where the subluxations are with chronic constipation, there's certain patterns that we find. Oftentimes it is the C1 to C3 area. So oftentimes it's right up here because it's the vagus nerve that comes out of here that controls the tone of the digestive system, right down to the large intestine here. And then we also find L1 and 2. Why is that? Oh, that's the sympathetic nerve supply that goes to the large intestine. And then L5 to S3, that's the very bottom. That's the other parasympathetic that goes to the bowels. I once heard this amazing podcast. I wish I could remember it. And it was a woman who specialized in the anus. And she just said how amazing the anus was. That it was this part of the body that was like just ignored, but it was a part of the body that could sense that there were things around that needed to be kept in one place and not let out. And then it sensed when it was time to let them out and it could be released. And she just was thrilled with how smart the anus was. So what is controlling the anus? The nervous system. That's right. And so here we have, and sometimes we'll have people that they'll get constipated, like if they have to travel, like they're away from their house where they're just comfortable and relaxed and they're in their strange place and they just don't go when they're in a strange place. Or I have kids that they won't go at school. And so then they end up getting outside of a rhythm. As far as constipation goes, I want to let you know that there is a certain time of the day, just as a rhythm, that the body will tend to want to poop. And it's usually around 10:30 a.m. And so if you're struggling with constipation, sometimes it's a good idea to just go and sit for a little while around 10:30. Because one of the things that'll happen is if you don't go at that time, the body, then the colon actually will take the poop that's ready to come out and they'll say, okay, if you're not ready to go right now, we're going to see if we can get a little bit more water out of this. And then the longer it stays in the colon, we're going to see if we can get a little bit more water out of this. Next thing you know, you've got these dense, round boluses. And the next thing you know, they're getting harder and harder. And now it's getting harder and harder to poop. So if you can go at around 10:30, just sit in a relaxed way, you're going to get those out before they keep staying in the colon too long and getting firmer and firmer and firmer. So also, again, getting adjusted is a key thing here. And, we can talk about things that people use like fiber that changes the texture of the feces. But if the nervous system is intact, then you don't need to rely on the fiber to try to make it as loose and soft as possible. Sometimes people are trying to make it really loose and soft and they go out of balance. So we do look at constipation as a neurological concern because it changes the tone of the GI tract. All right. And if you are struggling with constipation, maybe you don't tell anybody else about it, but if you're watching this recording and you want to talk it down a little bit, just send us a text, gut talk, to our office number, 802-985-9850. I'm happy to have a 10-minute conversation with you just to see if I can help. So I'm happy to do that. Just reach out. All right, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, celiac. So this is all affecting a little bit higher up in the intestines. And let's look at the gut wall now and see how that works. Because again, the GI tract, it goes all the way through. And so in these situations, you can have inflammation in the GI tract all the way through. The GI tract is very sophisticated. It's a hose with two openings at each end, right? And so when food goes through the digestive tract, it's not actually inside you until it's broken down and absorbed and metabolized in your body. So really, the body is like a donut, and the donut hole is the digestive tract. So you put the food in, it's not in your body yet until you digest it, it breaks down, and it is absorbed through the walls of the digestive system. That's when it now is in your body, right? And you've heard the phrase, you are what you eat, but no, that's not true. You are what you absorb. That's what we want to be looking at. And so it has to be broken down and absorbed into your bloodstream, and then it can go all the way into you and all the way through you. But sometimes things will go into you and just stay in the digestive tract and go all the way through, and that means they've never gotten into your body. So what determines what comes in and out of you is the walls of the GI tract. The lumen is the lining of the GI tract. And if you think of a hose with an inside wall to it, it's the health of the inside wall that's involved when we talk about IBS situations. So let's dive deep and unpack this. We're going to get a little nerdy right now. All right, so what you're seeing right here is the gut wall, the inside of the gut wall, the lumen. And it is a barrier, and it's a barrier that is separating the bloodstream from the outside of the body. So if you think about it, the gut wall right here, inside the gut wall is your digestive system, which is actually outside of your body. This part is where the food is running, and it's outside of your body. Once it passes through the gut wall, then it will be inside your body. There are tight junctions that need to be established and maintained in order to protect your body from letting things get into the body that shouldn't be. And so if we have loose junctions, we have something called leaky gut, and that's going to set up a whole immune response, because now you have things going into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And now your immune system looks at everything that's in the body, which means in the bloodstream. And if it sees something that's not supposed to be there, now you're going to have to mount an immune response to take care of that. So when we zoom in on the GI tract, we're going to see that it's really not smooth. It has hills and valleys, and the curvy pattern is what increases the surface area so you can absorb more things. And so there's more room for the body to interact and pull out nutrients and exchange water. And if you zoom in even further, you have these little fingerlings, and they go right out into the lumen of the lumen is the opening of the digestive system. And that again just increases the surface area even more. And they actually are reaching out into the food so they can exchange the nutrients in the water. This is highly sensitive tissue. And ultimately, it's going to determine who you are and what you are, because it determines what foods and nutrients you're going to absorb into your body. And it is the nervous system that maintains the health of this gut lining. So what was this gut lining and digestive system designed for? We need to look at the ancestral diets and compare it to our current diets to answer that question. So here we see our modern diet has a whole bunch of grains in it. And grains are not good for you. I know it's a big shock for some people, but whole grains sometimes are even worse. And so if we look at the typical dietary pyramid, the grains are at the bottom, and the recommendations are 17 servings of grains per day. Like, it's unbelievable. But if you want to look like a pyramid, then you're going to follow those recommendations, right? But you want to think about grains and sugar as at the top instead. I don't know who's writing this stuff about these dietary guidelines, but you want to look at as very limited. The long and short of it is this: grains are seeds. Now think of what our ancestors would have eaten. Let's go back 3,700 generations, 40 to 60,000 years. What did the original human diet style look like? Were they eating grains? Were they grinding little seeds? No, they would eat the rabbit, which ate the grains and grasses and seeds. So they were getting the value of the nutrients from grains by eating the rabbit that ate them, because the rabbit was designed to eat the grains. So they'd eat the meat and the greens, but not the grains. They would eat animals that ate grains and grasses. They would eat fruit of trees and sometimes leaves of trees, but not the seeds. We eat fruits and vegetables, and then the tree itself, and then the tree itself in leaves, and then seeds that make the tree, right? Okay, what is a seed's job? Think about it. A seed is going to drop onto the ground. It's going to be in a very hostile environment in the soil. Everything is going to try and destroy it. So it actually has to have a protective coat around it. And that protective coat is going to protect it until it can grow new life into it. And so the seed is covered with anti-nutrients. Gluten, gliadin, phytic acid, these are anti-nutrients. And they're toxicants. They're elements that exist in seed and grain that protect it in the soil so it doesn't get fungus on it and other things don't eat it, to kill it off so that it can now actually grow into a plant. So these toxicants, they irritate the very sensitive gut lining. And so we can end up with irritation that's called leaky gut syndrome. And these are the sources of the toxicants that are coming in. Now, even if you look at more recent ancient cultures from 3000 BC up to a few hundred years ago, about 400 years ago, there was no evidence of chronic illness, but they still would never consume grains the way we do today. They would always have either soaked, sprouted, or fermented those grains, which would essentially neutralize the anti-nutrients and make them fit for human consumption. The grains would also have been part of an entire complex diet style of daily fermented foods, minimal sweets, no processed foods, and they would never have included the modern hybridized grains that we have, never mind any of the GMO versions of those grains. And never mind the ubiquitous use of herbicides and pesticides that we use today, like Roundup, otherwise known as glyphosate, which works on pests by destroying their gut function. And so if we eat that, why are we surprised that it destroys our gut function as well? All right, so let's zoom in even more here. Now we're looking at the lining of the gut. I'm going to just move this to the side again here. How do I make it go? There we go. There we are. So if we look at the lining of the gut here, we can see this is the inside where the food is, and this is the bloodstream right here. So this is the digestive system, the wall of the intestines right here, and this is the lining of the intestines. And you can see all the little villi, the fingerlings that are sticking up, again, absorbing the nutrients that come in. Now we also see right here these junctions. These are the tight junctions, and they're doing their job. This is an opening that is letting things get in that should not get in. Things like this are getting in that shouldn't get in. And right here, this is something that actually this is inflammation, so it may be actually splitting this even open to get in. So we have the tight junctions that will be selective to choose what comes in, and then we have the inflammation that is actually just letting things leak in. So we have the paracellular organisms that can get in. We have where's number 2? Here we go, transcellular. So they get in between the junctions. They get right through. We've got these pathogens here that are lurking about that can get in. And we have food allergens. So once something gets through that shouldn't be there, I was explaining this to somebody yesterday, that when we break down food properly, when we break down proteins, we break them down into amino acids. And then those separate amino acids come in, and then we'll use those to build something in the body. If a protein gets in that is not broken down into an amino acid and it's still the structure of that protein, a protein has identification to it. The amino acids are just the amino acids, but if they're joined together into a protein, then they have an ID. And so if that protein gets into the body, and that is egg protein or strawberry protein or peanut protein, if it gets into the bloodstream, your immune system says, what is that protein doing here? That's not supposed to be here. This is something we need to get rid of. And then it'll mark it and ID it. We can recognize. So next time you try to come in, we're going to be on it. And now your body, even before it gets to this place, your immune system's already watching and seeing, wait, we saw that before in the bloodstream. It shouldn't have been there. And so now you have an allergic response to it. So that's how how food allergens are created, is when we have leaky gut, we have things getting in that shouldn't get in. Another way that food allergens have also shown up is when people get injections, like they'll get a latex allergy because the needle itself actually is piercing latex as it is then being used to inject something. And so the latex particles get into the bloodstream. The body says, what's that doing there? And now you have a latex allergy. Now, depending on what's being injected in, a lot of vaccines, for example, have proteins that are very similar to peanuts or to eggs, or it's cultured in an egg medium, things like that. So when you inject that directly into the bloodstream, if there are any proteins that are contaminated and they get in, then our bodies are all of a sudden going to start to have these food allergens as well. All right, so again, I'm just going shallow with you here, almost like a cartoony image here, but I just want you to get the idea behind it. And so if we start to have these undigested proteins that are irritating the immune system, it's going to activate that immune response, and the immune cells are going to now create this whole swelling, inflammation, and mucus all through here, because it's just trying to, like, if we can't maintain these tight junctions, let's just build up a bunch of mucus here to try and block things out and get to those nasty things that shouldn't be in the bloodstream. Let's try to get to them before they even get into the bloodstream. So we get that whole inflammatory response. But basically the gut lining gets irritated. And so if you have subluxations that cause nerve endurance, that cause weaknesses in the GI tract, and then you start putting foods in there that aren't supposed to be there, which creates irritation, and then the body can't heal, and you end up with leaky gut syndrome, then you also get leaky brain, leaky kidneys, leaky blood vessels, and on from there. Now, glyphosate is again, a big problem because it is so ubiquitous. Basically, when they spray glyphosate, everybody knows glyphosate is Roundup, right? Another brand name for that is Roundup. And so glyphosate is something that is sprayed on crops, and it will kill. It's an herbicide, so it kills things, and a pesticide. It kills things. It actually, the bugs that eat the glyphosate, the corn that has glyphosate on it, it destroys their digestive system. So that's how it works. But when they spray glyphosate, 10% of it gets on the crops that they're spraying. The other 9% goes off into the wind. And so with our weather patterns, we actually are seeing everything accumulate right in the Mississippi Valley, and then it all rains down. And so the whole section that is the Mississippi Delta is Cancer Alley. It's known as Cancer Alley. And it's because so many of those people actually have so much glyphosate that they're exposed to. Wheat is sprayed with glyphosate, not while it's growing, but when it's done growing, when they want to harvest it, because it kills it so fast, it dries out really fast. And so they can harvest it. They don't have to wait the normal amount of time for it to dry out. So wheat is commonly sprayed with glyphosate. So just recognize that glyphosate is completing a perfect storm here. We have our DNA. So we've all inherited genomes from 3,700 generations back of healthy human beings. Like, we wouldn't be here if they weren't all healthy, successful human beings behind us, right? That's the only way we get here. And so we get all this uniqueness passed down to us. I want you to know that in all the studying of genetics that I've done, I've taken some advanced genetics courses and conferences, what I've learned from that, and what I always keep taking away, is that 99.6% of us have the perfect genome to express perfect health over time, as long as we have the perfect environment over time. That's what's the key here. So we have to have that right environment. And there are nuances and variants that make different folks more vulnerable than others to certain stresses in our environment. So how our DNA expresses is based on what environment we are in. And that may turn disease expressing genes on when we're in the wrong environment. And if we alter our environment so much that a lot of these genes that would have been dormant in a healthy environment are woken up and turned on, it now makes us in an unhealthy environment. So the amount of stress that we have in our modern world, from the chemical stresses we're exposed to, the mental emotional stresses, and the physical stresses, you put all that together, and now you're creating an environment that is stressful, and it can upregulate these genes that would have been dormant otherwise. So we have the DNA, but we have the epigenetic factors that are causing the DNA to start to express itself. And now you add even more of those stressors, the physical, the chemical, the emotional stresses. They're destroying the gut lining. And now the microbiome of the gut is upset. And we're destroying the gut lining with the grains and the glyphosate and the Roundup. Glyphosate it actually makes both mercury and aluminum more toxic. So if we already have exposures to those things and we have the leaky gut, and when you add that glyphosate, the mercury and aluminum that we may have been exposed to that we were trying to manage, it makes them even more toxic. And so we're really having some trouble with the newer generations that are exposed to this. Our younger generations are in trouble here. Now, there are some tools that we can use to protect ourselves. And one of my favorites is a product that was created by a fellow that I love, Dr. Zach Bush. He actually was a medical doctor that he did research in cancer research when he was actually a resident early on in his career. And he actually found something that he thought was promising, and he brings it to his senior research head. And he says, look what I found. I think this is something we should pursue. And the guy looks at it and he says, yeah, we're not going to pursue that because we can't make any money from that. Because that's something that is like, it's like a vitamin that's going to help. He says, we're not pursuing that. And he was so disillusioned by research, like, wait, I found something that could cure cancer and we're not pursuing it because you can't make any money from it. And so he learned early on, like, okay, that's not necessarily the way that I want to go. And so often later on in his career, he left the practice of medicine in hospitals and he decided he wanted to go really try and help people with nutrition. So he opened up this clinic in Appalachia, and he was just trying to help these people with their improving their diets. And one day, one of his buddies comes in with this research study. He says, here, you should look at this research study because you're telling these people to eat healthier, and they're trying to eat healthier, but the food that they're eating is unhealthy food. The vegetables are grown in unhealthy soil, so they're not getting the results they should be getting because the food is actually not healthy food. And so read this study. And he's like, I don't know if I have time to read that, but I'll glance through it. And so this is a study about soil science. He's glancing through the study and he sees this graph, or not a graph, an image of a benzene ring, like this chemical structure. And he looks at it, he's like, wait, that was the cancer, the cure to cancer that I found. That's that same structure. He's like, what is this? And it was a study that was talking about the substances in soil that are the communication substances that allow the environment to communicate with itself. So, you know, if a tree in the forest gets hit with a blight, it will actually send signaling through the communication substances in the soil through the forest so that the rest of the trees actually get notified that this blight is coming. And so by the time the blight moves through the forest, the trees on the other side, they've absorbed more boron if that was needed to protect them. And so they don't get the blight. So this communication substance is in our soils. And so if we grow our food in soils that are depleted of this communication substance, then we're not eating foods that have it. And now our bodies can't use it. And this communication substance in the body, what it does is if two cells are side by side, they can communicate with each other. But if there's no communication substance, they can't. So if you have one cell that is a healthy cell and another cell next to it that is a sick cell that needs help, it can't communicate that it needs help. And then a third cell that actually should just die right now is not dying because it can't communicate. And so if you have good communication substance, then the cell that should die, it can die. The cell that is sick that needs repair, it can get repair. And the healthy cell can maintain that support and be healthy. So he found by doing research that if he put this communication substance with cells that were gut lining cells in a petri dish, if he put the communication substance in, it would actually help to heal leaky gut. And then he found that if he put glyphosate in, it would cause the leaky gut. But if the communication substance was in the petri dish with it, it would protect it from the glyphosate. And so when he saw that, he says, like, wait, I got to get this to my people. So he created this product. It used to be called Restore was the old name, but it basically is helping the human microbiome by helping the communication substances. And so it helps you have a healthier microbiome. It is not a probiotic. It's something different. But it used to be called Restore was the old name. And the nickname for it was Healthy Dirt Water. So I love that name. But this is something that's really important if you have any gut issues. I actually recommend it even for healthy people, especially if you don't know exactly where your food is coming from. And knowing that the glyphosate is just coming in the rain anyway, we all could use some protection. So this is something that I've been carrying in the office for a long time because it actually works so well. All right, so that's one solution. Another solution is we may need to actually go in and weed and seed and feed the gut in order to heal and seal the gut. Whoops, let's move this out of the way here. So this is a whole process that we go through in the office with different supplements that we'll use. So if you have an unhealthy microbiome and the gut flora is unhealthy and out of balance, we might need to weed and get rid of the unhealthy gut flora and then seed the healthy flora and make sure we're feeding the healthy ones and not feeding the unhealthy ones. And then from there, and once we have the proper gut flora, then we can use some other supplements that will help to heal the gut, which then allows those tight junctions to be tight again. And then we can seal the gut so we don't have the leaky gut anymore. And so some of the things that we use for that, for weeding the gut, we use something called gut flora complex. And it's made up of andrographis, berberine, oregano, and anise. Sometimes I'll use berberine just straight itself. Sometimes I'll use myrrh, which is, you remember the wise kings brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Myrrh is an excellent tool for the immune system. It basically just tells the immune system to just go in a very strong way. And then when we seed the gut, that means we're going to offer a good array of healthy probiotics to help seed the gut. And then feeding the gut, we're going to feed the gut with fiber, rosemary, green tea, grapeseed, and turmeric. These are some of the most powerful things to feed the gut with. So we have products that have that. And then if we need to heal the gut, this one product called High Pep, it's a complex that uses licorice, chamomile, and meadowsweet, which is very soothing to the gut. We also might use aloe vera and okra. Actually, you know how slimy okra is. It's fantastic for healing the gut. And then for sealing the gut, I like to use the Ion Biome product that I just mentioned. And fiber is also important for helping to seal the gut as well. All right. And now for some people, I work at another whole level. We remember we talked about the DNA and the genes that can get upregulated to be disease-causing genes. So we know that celiac disease, for example, not everybody gets celiac from eating wheat and that sort of thing. But when you do have the celiac genes and they've been upregulated and you eat wheat, you put all that together, now you have celiac disease. So when I work with genetically based nutrition, what we do is we actually get a genetic test of somebody so we can see what all the potential variants are. And there's thousands and thousands that we're looking at. And some of them will be related to gut health, for example. And so what you inherit from your parents, you may inherit 2 really strong genes in that category where you have no susceptibility to celiac, for example. Or you might inherit 1 weak vulnerability and 1 strong optimized. And so you have somewhat of a vulnerability if it gets upregulated. And then some people, they inherit 2 baddies. And so if that gets upregulated, they're going to be most likely having the experience of the celiac. So once we look at that genetic assessment, we actually can do another, generate reports that will help us to understand which of the genes are upregulated and which are downregulated. Sometimes we'll use blood tests as well to identify that. Sometimes just doing a symptom survey can also point things out in the right direction. And then from that, we know for each and every one of those genetic SNPs or variants, we know exactly what their function is in the whole network and the cogs in the wheel of the functions in our cells. And we know that they all need certain enzymes or catalysts to work properly, and they have a certain function along the way. And so therefore, if a gene has a vulnerability, we actually can just ramp up what the supporting catalysts and enzymes might be for that specific part of the process that gene is in charge of. And we can actually optimize that gene. And then what it looks like is that it actually can downregulate some of these genes. So for some people, I'd love to work at that genetically based level. It's going as far upstream as you can go. And it's powerful when we get to work at that level. So what are the do's and don'ts for diet if we are looking at what we are genetically designed for? The do's are do the non-starchy vegetables. You can do some fruit, meat, poultry, and fish, range-fed eggs, so the free-range eggs, the natural fats, such as the healthy animal fats, butter or coconut oil, avocados, that sort of natural fats, some nuts and seeds. And again, better to soak them or sprout them before we eat them. And then drinking water, right? So those are the do's. And the don'ts are don't eat those refined carbohydrates. Don't eat those cereals and grains. Watch out for those sweeteners. Watch out for the bad vegetable oils. And so again, what do we mean by bad vegetable oils? Right here are the things that are canola oil, soybean oil, the canola, some rapeseed oil, which is another name for canola oil, corn oil, like those are the bad vegetable oils. And now we find that there the other seed oils also can be troublesome, like the sunflower oil and the safflower oil. So the exceptions are olive oil, avocado oil, palm oil, coconut oils. Those are the healthy vegetable oils. Legumes actually are not something that our ancestors would have eaten very much of, and they have those same kind of anti-nutrients to them as well. If you are going to do them, you definitely want to make sure that they are soaked, sprouted, or fermented. And then dairy products, our ancestors would not have eaten dairy products. I do think that dairy products can be okay for some people, but for a lot of people that struggle with GI issues, it's really good to stay away from them. You'll get better results for the most part. And then you may reach a point where you can tolerate the healthy versions of them. If you are going to do dairy, you want to look at the raw dairy, because it will have all the enzymes that would have been present to help digest the lactose and everything. The lactase is in there as part of it. So you can get raw milk. We're so blessed in Vermont to have so many raw milk dairies around that we can get raw milk products from. You can actually get raw milk cheeses. And then otherwise, just looking at, full fat, like yogurts and things like that are fermented, or kefir, that sort of thing. And then I will tell you that I do really like the A2 gene cows as well, because they are the simplest genetic. And so they go back, so that the milk that they produce is it's the simplest level of genetics. It's our body can actually recognize it much more easily than some of the more modern versions. So I do like those A2 cows. And then soda, juice, and alcohol, we're going to avoid that as well, right? So those are the do's and the don'ts. So do the do's and don't do the don'ts. All right. I want to give you a gift. Because you're coming to this presentation, you are a doer, you're an action taker. If you're here, you're somebody that likes to learn. And so this is an amazing cookbook of very simple foods that are all ones that I would highly recommend and support you eating. And it's a book that's made by the Standard Process Company. And it's a book that we use when people are doing a 21-day purification program, because we want to make sure that they're not putting anything stressful in with their diet. And so we have people eat a specific diet of whole unprocessed foods. All these recipes are delicious and they're easy to make, which are the two things that I require when I'm using a recipe book. You can actually we can order a hard copy for you if you want. They're not that expensive, maybe 10 or 20 bucks, something like that. However, you can actually download your own copy of it. So if you go to, do I have it here? Yeah, there it is. If you go to standardprocess.com, you can take a picture of this if you wanted to, or a screenshot. And it's Standard Process. You go there, media, literature, and then cookbook. But if you just went on and did a search for purification cookbook or 1 degree of change, you'll find it. And it's awesome. If you want to see it when you come into the office, I have a copy of it in the office too. All right, but you might get some great recipes for the holidays that are coming up too, that are healthy things. And so again, if you struggle with digestive concerns, this time of the year can be hell for you, because you're going to all these gatherings and all these unhealthy foods are out there for you. And willpower is only going to take you so far. So for the holiday gatherings, if you're struggling with digestive issues, you do need some discipline, or you're going to suffer from it. And so make sure that you bring a healthy food with you. Make sure you don't go hungry. You go eat something healthy before you go, and your willpower is going to last you much better. All right. So for people that struggle with, and I wanted to just address one other piece here. Let me just back up a little bit. So the gut also, when we look at the tone of the gut, we talked about the tone of the gut with the constipation, but I want to talk about the lining of the gut here. That one right there. So people ask me about, what about diverticulosis or diverticulitis? So diverticulosis is when you lose integrity in the lining of the wall, so you get a pocket. And then that pocket, you should have a certain tone to the bowels, but if you get lose the integrity of the tone, then you can get a pocket, And now you're going to get food stuck in that pocket that's going to then be irritating, and it can get inflamed. And then you go from diverticulosis to diverticulitis. Itis means inflammation. And so that can happen with loss of tone of the gut wall, as well as just all those irritations to the gut wall that can happen. So people that have IBS or irritable bowel disease or inflammatory bowel syndrome, any of those things, they might be more likely to also get a diverticulitis because of all the stress on the lining of the gut. Okay. There we are. So when we're working with people that suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, celiac, this is more of a chemical stress to the body, because it's the foods that are coming in that are stressing the system and causing that inflammation. And so commonly we'll find the subluxation at C1. Again, it's that vagal tone that is getting irritated from the chemicals and causing subluxations. And then T7 to T11, this area right here, because as you can see, this is the part that is dominating this upper part of the intestine as well. And so again, here's some interesting research. Just looking at the spine, we see that when somebody has a reversal of the curve in the spine, so what we want to have a beautiful forward curve in the spine. Here's a healthy curve right here. You can see a forward curve, healthy, normal, forward curve X-ray, forward curve MRI. So this is a reverse curve, which means there's going to be stress on the spinal cord. The nerve roots that exit from the spine are going to be irritated, right? And so this is what someone with Crohn's disease has, a spine like that. Here's another one, spine like that. Here's another one, spine like that. So it's interesting that there's a pattern here of an unhealthy spine with people that are suffering from Crohn's disease. And yet when we can get the spine healthier, we have people that, hey, I'm not struggling with that anymore. So they actually can heal the gut. All right, and so now we're going up the spine here. And so now we're looking at the acid reflux and heartburn. So what's happening here? Again, just looking at the anatomy. So we have a muscle that closes to prevent acid reflux. We call it the hiatal sphincter is right here. So the esophagus is, the food comes down, you chew the food, you swallow it, it comes down through the esophagus, it goes past this sphincter, and it goes into the stomach. The stomach then has the food, but it has the stomach acids that are secreted to help digest the food. So in modern life, we see more and more trouble with acid reflux and heartburn. And what happens is this trap door, let's see if my pointer works, here we go. This trap door where the hiatal sphincter is, that's protecting the esophagus from the stomach acids. You see the acidity of the stomach is very acidic, but the lining of the stomach is unusual in that it can tolerate that. The lining of the esophagus cannot tolerate that acidic pH. And so if the food from the stomach, the acid and the food, if it goes back up into the esophagus because of a loss of integrity of this hiatal sphincter, it can come back up. And then when that acid starts to irritate the esophagus lining, that's what's called GERD, or acid reflux, or heartburn is another name for it. So it's a trap door, and it should be it should allow things to go into the stomach, but not allow them to come back out. So when there's dysfunctional, again, it's a tonal issue. If the sphincter does not close tightly, then it's going to go back up into the unprotected esophagus, and it's going to irritate it. I tell you, I have some people, when that acid starts to hit the esophagus, they're like, whoa, I thought I was having a heart attack. The pain was so bad right around my heart. They call it heartburn, right? And so it turns out, actually, they were having acid reflux. And so the more stressful that life is, think about it. If we have chronic social stress, we tend to be choking down our foods, all these deadlines and commitments that we have. We're eating crappy foods. we're being sedentary, we're sitting all the time, which creates thoracic spine problems. The thoracic spine is what regulates the nerve supply to this area. And so we just see more and more of this heartburn and acid reflux happening in our practices. And so, again, that muscular valve has to keep things, it's a one-way street typically, so it should only allow things to go in a certain direction. The stomach likes to have about 4.3 pH of acidity. The gut likes to be 7.4, which is pretty much neutral. And so there's a problem if these two environments are not separated, and that's what happens. So there's this is the hiatal sphincter, and then at the other end is the pyloric sphincter, and that's what holds the food in the stomach until it's digested, and then it allows it to come into the small intestine where we continue to digest it. But the stomach is really there to mix everything up, and then before it goes out the bottom into the small intestine, where it's going to have further digestion and then start to absorb the nutrients and the water further downstream. So it's a tonal issue. And in the spine, we tend to find subluxations in this area right here. Again, because this is where the nerves come out that are going to the stomach, T4 to T6. I do want to point out that poor posture is part of the problem here. Part of it is if you have poor posture and you're hunched down, you're going to compress your organs here. And if you put pressure on the stomach, it can actually literally push the food back up through that sphincter. And I've even had cases where the stomach is up through the sphincter where it shouldn't be, up through the diaphragm in that sphincter. And so sometimes I have to actually pull the stomach back down out of the diaphragm hole where the esophagus comes through, just so that's another way to stop the hiatal sphincter from losing integrity. But posture that's deteriorating, hunching forward with that forward head weight bearing, that actually can create a lot of upper thoracic subluxations. So again, if you're struggling with these kinds of things, please feel free to message me, send us a message, and we can set up a time to talk, and I can see if I can help. 802-985-9850. Send us a text that says Gut Talk, and my team will connect us. Now, micro trauma, again, we talked about thoracic spine. Look at the posture of these people and look at it. It is all ages that is having this poor posture. And this micro trauma is also leading to tech neck. And it's gotten so bad, it's an addiction to the phone, and it's causing it's causing a pandemic of digestive problems, this tech neck. And because the consequences are real, it creates the upper thoracic subluxations, and indigestion is one of the most common things that we're finding. And again, gals hate to hear this idea of them getting a hump up here, dowager's hump, it's called, right? But I'm seeing more and more of that. So the most unhealthy positions put pressure on the viscera, make it not as easy to breathe. It affects the lungs, it affects the heart, it's all day long. And so the modern person is just turning into this. And again, it's an accumulation of these bad habits and poor posture that go together. And so then, of course, we can actually measure whether or not you have the effects of stress in your system and what parts of the body are being affected, so that abnormal HRV is going to show us that the current stress load is impairing the body. And we've got to make positive changes. If I don't see somebody over time moving towards the bullseye, it's a sign of somebody that's aging before their time. So these two tests are just part of the full extent of testing that we do to identify subluxations. We use instrumentation, as I just mentioned. We also use motion palpation and static palpation. So we're going to feel the spine to see, is it moving? In areas where the spine is not moving, it's because it's been strapped down by those muscle spasms. That's an indication of where there may be a subluxation. Static palpation literally can just feel the positioning of the vertebra. Is it rotated? Visualization is looking at the posture. So are we seeing that typical forward head carriage that we oftentimes see with people that have digestive problems? Do we see that they're swaying from one side to the other, that the brain is not really tracking where the body is in space, that it has a vague neural self-image because it's not getting the proper mechanoreceptors telling it where the body is in space? And then x-rays are useful because they can show us, for example, with that x-ray that I showed you with the Crohn's disease, right? It can show us if there's a loss of the biomechanics in the spine. It also will show us how long the problem has been there. So you'll get degenerative change over time if you have uncorrected subluxations. And we can see that on the x-ray. So we may have people that come in that say this digestive problem just started, and yet we'll see there's degenerative change there. We can say, yeah, but it's been a long time coming, that you've had the subluxation patterns that were pushing you in that direction of digestive problems over time. But when did it start, right? From the original subluxation, quite possibly. So the 3 steps that we use to correct subluxations, we want to train you on how to break the bad habits. So again, with posture, especially with GERD, or with the reflux, acid reflux, and the heartburn, when you're done eating, you don't want to go and sit in a chair and hunch down. That's going to push it right up. And you don't want to eat late at night and then lay down, because that, again, if the sphincter still hasn't gained a good tone to it yet, then it can actually ooze up into the esophagus. So we need to break bad habits of poor posture, of eating bad foods, all of those kinds of bad habits. We want to do spinal exercises that get the spine strong, specific exercises to strengthen the spine, to remold the curves in the spine, and then the chiropractic adjustments that are correcting the subluxations that are interfering with function. So that's how we do it here. And another dangerous belief is, oh, there's nothing that can be done. So many people have been told that, right? Even Dr. Zeno was told that nothing can be done. We're just going to have to do that surgery and remove your colon. Well, he thought he had tried everything, but he hadn't. And so if you know people that are struggling with digestive problems and they haven't tried chiropractic yet, then don't let them lose hope that nothing can be done. Actually, there can be things that can be done. But the biggest problem is that people then just start procrastinating. Even when there is something that can be done, they don't quite get to it. I'll get to it someday. Oh, maybe after the holidays. That's the most common thing I hear this time of the year is, yeah, maybe it'll be one of my New Year's resolutions, right, to make changes. But I want to encourage you to stay strong, to finish the year strong. Use some discipline, and you're going to get the rewards from that by finishing the year strong. So I'm going to finish up now our talk, and I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to stop the recording as well. And those of you that do have questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but let me just stop the recording. So thanks for watching, everybody.